Right, hello. Welcome to Volpara's annual general meeting. And due to a last minute change in New Zealand COVID status, this makes it a totally virtual one. I am Paul Reid, the chairman of the company. I'd like to introduce who I have with me today, Dr. Ralph Hyman, who is our CEO and managing director. Also have with me here virtually my fellow directors, John Dithens, Roger Allen, Karen Lindgren, and Dr. Monica Sani. Unfortunately, John Pavadilis is unable to join us today. He's in Greece and it's about 3 a.m. or sometime like that. In addition, we have our CFO, Craig Hadfield, on the call today and available to answer questions later. And I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to Kevin Brown. Kevin's a partner at PwC, who is the company's auditors. So today's meeting has been held online via the Lumi platform. This allows shareholders, proxies and guests to attend the meeting virtually. All attendees are watching a live webcast of the meeting. In addition, shareholders and proxies have the ability to ask questions and submit votes. Questions can be submitted at any time. To ask a question, please press on the speech bubble icon and this will open a new screen for you. At the bottom of that screen, there is a section for you to type your question. Once you have finished typing, please hit the arrow symbol to send. Please note that while you can submit questions from now on, I will not address them until a relevant time in the meeting. Also note that your question may be moderated, or if we receive multiple questions on one topic, we will combine them together in the efficiency of time, etc. Finally, due to time constraints, we may run out of time to answer all your questions. If this does happen, we will answer them in due course via email/posting responses on our website. Voting today will be conducted by way of a poll on all items of business. In order to provide you with enough time to vote, I will shortly open voting for all of the resolutions. At that time, if you're eligible to vote at this meeting, a new polling icon will appear. Selecting this icon will bring up a list of resolutions and present to you with your voting options. To cast your vote, simply select one of the options. There is no need to hit a submit or enter button as this vote is automatically recorded. You do, however, have the ability to change your vote up until the time I declare voting closed. I'm now declaring the voting open on all items of business. The polling icon will soon appear. Please submit your votes at any time. I will give you a warning before I move to closing the voting. So, pleased to be advised by the company secretary, we do have a quorum for the meeting. So I therefore declare the annual general meeting open. The minutes of the previous AGM have been signed by me as true and correct record of that meeting and are available for inspection by request. I have written advice on the proxies received prepared by Boardroom, the share registry based in Australia. Proxy votes received totaled at the moment at 84,597,131 shares, which is equivalent to 34% of the ordinary voting shares in the company. I intend to vote as chairman of the meeting. All open proxies in favour of the resolutions put to the meeting. The proxy voting summary and supporting schedules are available for inspection on request. The notice of the meeting was dispatched to all shareholders. I move that the notice of the meeting be taken as read, and if there are no questions, I'll move into the procedures.
No questions at this point, Paul.
Great, thank you. Right, the procedure of the meeting, I will give a very short address, then Dr. Monica Sani, our outgoing director, will also give a short address, then we'll turn to our ordinary business in accordance with the notice of the meeting, pages 3 and 4. And then once we've finished that piece, I'll hand over to Ralph Hyman, our CEO, who will address the meeting and take us through quite a number of updates that we have across the company. We'll take this opportunity to go into a bit more depth. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. But as I said, as we go along, do submit your questions so that we can group them as we go and we can efficiently address them at the appropriate time in the meeting. So, well, what a year it has been. The world was starting to return to some sense of normality, then Delta emerged. And it does feel a bit like Groundhog Day for many of us, but the difference now being we're more equipped, and Volpara has the ability and the agility to respond, to these situations, ensuring we're well placed to serve our customers globally. For us now, it is a business as usual. And that is demonstrated by over the last 12 months, the business has continued to grow. Our ARR is up 55% to 27.9 million, and 20% of that growth was organic, the remaining being via acquisition. Our gross margins are holding up at over 90%, which is fantastic, and our cost to customer acquisition remains a key focus, something that actually COVID has helped with as you change your business model to more of a digital world and less physical having to travel. It certainly does help get your acquisition costs down. During the year, you would have noted we acquired CRA Health, who are based in Boston. And like the MRS transaction last financial year, this has proven to be a value accretive transaction for our business. We are very pleased with how the integration of CRA Health is progressing into Volpara, and really welcome to the family. And our customers are really taking up the benefit of their services as well. We have also increased significantly in our digital platforms to ensure our scalability, and we also now have access to remarkable levels of data to power not only our current product set, but to enable our world-leading scientists to work on our future algorithms, which will power our future products and AI, etc., going forward for the company. We are excited about the year ahead, but recognise the current share price has not matched expectations, partly due to the global trends, but partly wanting people to see how this pandemic played out. We fully believe we are on track and are very confident about the year ahead. I'd like to also take this moment to thank Dr. Monica Sani for a huge contribution to Volpara as a director and chief medical officer. Monica is not leaving the family. She'll remain closely aligned to Volpara and will shortly give you an update on her very exciting new venture, which will make a difference to breast health and breast care in New Zealand. Today, we will announce a US-based replacement for Monica in the coming days. Finally, I'd like to thank my fellow board members and employees, customers and shareholders for their continued support that you've all shown Volpara over the last 12 months. I'd like to now pause and introduce Dr. Monica Sani.
Thanks, Paul. So in stepping down as director, I will continue my role at Volpara as a luminary. I think it's really important. We're at a pivotal point in women's health and breast health in particular. And it's really important that physicians like myself do a lot of advocating for the best practice and the best standard of care. We know that when we find breast cancer at stage 1, which is considered an early stage breast cancer, the cure rate is 92%. So many of you have known people who've had later end stage breast cancer, and that shouldn't happen today. So I'm redirecting my energies to advocating for better breast health practice, policy change, and started a new venture called Breast Institute New Zealand, which is a private clinical practice here in Wellington. We're looking forward to using all the Volpara tools, many of which we're already implementing, and it helps us serve women better by offering a more personalized breast cancer experience. We're also focused on education because I think the biggest gap is women don't actually know what is the best breast health practice, and for them as individuals, what type of screening regimen they might need or if they need additional screening. So we're working on really improving that communication between healthcare providers like myself and direct patient experiences. Also working on advocacy for better breast health practices, not just in New Zealand, but across the world, and joining our partners who are all over the world doing the same type of good work. So we're hoping to help elevate that both with research, education, and better clinical practice. I will still be in the luminary and in the Volpara family and looking forward to keeping up the good work. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Monica. So now I'll just move on to the different items to consider, and I'm going to go through all of these one by one before we get to Ralph. So item number one is to receive and consider the annual report, director's report, and the auditor's report for the company and its controlled entities for the financial year ended 31st March 2021. There is no formal resolution to put to the meeting, so I would be pleased to take questions from shareholders on the annual reports. We obviously have Craig on the call, our CFO, and we also have PwC, who can field any relevant questions. So I'll just pause for a moment.
There's no questions right now, Paul, but maybe we just pause for 15 seconds to see if anyone sends one through.
Okay. So if there are no questions, I will proceed to the other resolutions on the notice of the meeting. Before we proceed, I will note that the final results for each resolution will be received from our share registry boardroom shortly after the AGM ends, which at that point they'll be released to the ASX. So first one, re-election of Paul Reid, myself as a director of the company. So it's to consider and if thought fit to pass the following resolution as an ordinary resolution. That Paul Reid, who retires as a director of the company by rotation in accordance with clause 20.5 of the company's constitution and who is eligible for re-election, be re-elected as a director of the company. The proxy votes are as follows: for just over 76 million, open proxies 1 million, against just over 7 million, abstained a little bit over 100,000, and no instructions from 13 million. There. We'll pause. So Craig, you'll let me know if any questions come through.
Yep, there are no questions at the moment, Paul.
Okay. Next item, to grant the grant of options to Roger Allen to bring his non-cash remuneration in line with other directors. The context to this has been an oversight that should have been cleared up several years ago that is now being picked up. So Roger is now sort of being on par with other directors in the company. So to consider and if thought fit to pass the following resolution as an ordinary resolution in pursuant to in accordance with ASX listing rule 10.14 and for all other purposes, shareholders approve the grant to Roger Allen, the director of the company, of 150,000 options on the terms and conditions set out in the explanatory notes to the notice of this meeting. Please refer to the notice of this meeting for the voting exclusion statement. The proxy votes at the moment sit at just over 44 million, open proxies just under 900,000, against just shy of 21 million. There's abstained of 98. There are some exclusions of 18 million. That's obviously primarily Roger himself, and no instructions, 13 million. Pause there, Craig, and again, let me know.
No questions, Paul.
Okay, the next one is the approval of the updated ESOP employee share option plan for ASX listing rule purposes to allow the issuance of incentive stock options to US employees under US tax laws. There already is an ESOP in place, but it's one ESOP for the company. This is splitting the ESOPs into effectively two ESOPs, and it's really so we can manage the US tax implications, which are different for New Zealand and Australia than US-based employees. So there's no substantial change to the actual existing practice of issuing options. So to consider and if thought fit to pass the following resolution as an ordinary resolution, that for the purpose of ASX ruling 7.2, exception 13, and for all other purposes, shareholders approve the Volpara Health Technologies Limited employee share option plan, ESOP, including terms of associated option deed, and the grant of options and issue of shares under that plan to the company's employees and executives, including the grant of up to 5 million incentive stock options to employees based in the United States of America. Currently, the votes are sitting at just over 40 million for, open 1 million, against 340,000, abstained 117,000. There's some exclusions there of 43 million, no instructions, 13 million there.
No questions, Paul?
No questions, Craig. We're whizzing through this. Approval increase of the director's remuneration pool. Before I read this one out, I want to really clarify the reasons for this. This is not about increasing individual directors' remuneration. Tomorrow we'll announce the appointment of a new director who will be US-based. The US fees we pay, obviously, to US directors are pinned to local market and are more than fees we would pay to New Zealand directors or Australian directors. So as we appoint more directors in other jurisdictions, we're going to see our pool spend increase. And secondary to that, with foreign exchange changes, we are actually, when you convert that back to New Zealand dollars, we're actually hitting against our current headroom as it is at the moment, and coming close to the total amount. So that was the rationale for putting this resolution forward. To consider and if thought fit to pass the following resolution as an ordinary resolution, that for the purpose of ASX listing rule 10.17 and for all other purposes, the maximum aggregate annual remuneration payable to non-executive directors of the company be increased by New Zealand $200,000. So that is from New Zealand 500,000 to New Zealand 700,000 plus GST as appropriate. Please refer to the notice of the meeting for voting exclusion. The proxy votes so far for just over 43 million, open proxies 900,000, against 20.7 million. There's 140,000 abstained, some exclusions of 19.6 and no instructions 13.2. Any questions on that one, Craig?
There are none, Paul.
Okay. Flying along. Auditor's remuneration. To consider and if thought fit to pass the following resolution as an ordinary resolution, that the directors of the company are authorised to fix the fees and expenses of the auditor for the ensuing year. The proxy votes so far, 83 million for, open 1 million, against 138,000, abstain 55, no exclusions, no instructions 13 million. No questions on that one, I'm assuming, as well.
No.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of all the procedural matters of the AGM. And so now we get to turn over to Ralph and hear the more exciting updates in the business. Over to you, Ralph.
Cool. Thank you, Paul. You should be able to see on the screen a slide which says a remarkable year, and it's become traditional now at AGMs that I sit back and take a look and talk you through some of the things which kind of happen behind the scenes a little bit, and to expand out on some of those subjects which we don't normally talk about, and that's my intent again this year. But let's do a quick recap then on what has been a truly remarkable year, as Paul said. Coronavirus saw breast cancer screening stop, advanced stage cancer starting to be found, and so screening started up again quite urgently after that. It also saw trade shows stop and our US offices go entirely virtual. Despite those challenges, we adapted and came out of FY21 very strongly. Rebranded, much more focused on digital marketing, and as Paul said, this all helps drive down customer acquisition costs. We trained our sales team very much into remote sales. We reshaped that team, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We reshaped the overall strategy as well to be focusing more towards risk and genetics with personalised breast care, which has got lots of tailwinds behind it in the US in particular, and where we're getting a lot of traction. And as part of that, then we acquired CRA Health, Boston-based Harvard spin-out. And that acquisition, as Paul indicated earlier, just like MRS before it, has gone extremely well, and you'll see that in some of the dialogue we're about to have. Because of the strength of FY 2021, we've come out of it and we gave guidance of revenue for the year, 25 million plus, which we reiterate here. And so that is good growth, but also in the background, continuous focus of Craig and others in the team on making us ever more scalable, reducing that customer acquisition cost and on costs going out the door. Some of that is shown then by the end of Q1, which was the end of June for us. Annual recurring revenue was US 19.2 million after one of our biggest Q1s ever. And we were covering 33% of US women. So that's 1 in 3 women in the US that go for breast cancer screening are using in some way, shape or form part of our software platform, which is a fantastic position to be in. So if we have the next slide, please. Let's talk about the US team then. We restructured it to be much more digital, much more remote sales. We've also restructured it for SaaS as well. So we're taking it completely away now from your traditional medical device company. Some of the names up here are very familiar to you. Dave Metzapreti, Steve Mosley, Scott have all been with us for 5-10 years and are very much still a very big part of the company. Jill Spear came over from GE earlier this year, along with Christine and Marianne, and I'll talk about some of the structure in a minute. But also some of the names up here might be new to you. Brian Duran has come over from CRA. He's now our Chief Clinical Scientist, and Greg Gillette down the bottom there is one of our sales directors, and he also come over from CRA. So as well as these new people coming into the company, which is great, kind of big burst of energy and excitement and a real understanding of what we're doing, given their backgrounds. You'll see also, though, that just the overall structure. So we now very much have Erica is focused on new sales. Erin, who is part of the Seattle team that came over from MRS, very focused on customer operations for the whole company. Christine Bravo now is doing a great job in managing the installed base. That's managing that installed base to minimize the already low churn, but also to actually go in there now and start the upsell process for many of our products. And we're starting to reap some of the benefits of that. But then I'm also just going to note here as well, Marianne, last year we talked about going more direct to consumer. We are still very intent on doing that, but we're going to do it a bit slower than we indicated last year. So the focus is on risk and genetics. But as you're going to see, we still very much have an element to us, which is more direct to consumer, because it's still our belief that at the end of the day, we want women walking in the door getting Volpara level care, and we want women actually walking the door demanding Volpara level care. So we'll just go to the next slide. It's been real interesting the last couple of weeks. These are the big first big trade shows which have started back up in the US. So that top one was AHRA, the Association of Medical Imaging Management, hosted in Nashville. So there was a big range of vendors there. The attendance was respectable for the era of COVID that we live in, but the number of leads we actually got out of it was very very high compared to what we normally get at these shows, which was very promising to see. You'll see there on the bottom, that's Dave Metzapreti and Caitlin holding the fort for us in Nashville. And then on the right-hand side, another of our very experienced salespeople has been here 5-6 years, Perry Norris at Mammo in the Mountains in Santa Fe in New Mexico. So although we are very much digital first, trade shows are starting up again. And we are doing a lot of planning at the moment for RSNA, which is our big show in Chicago each year in December. That is going ahead. Again, we expect or fully expect the attendance to be down compared to what it usually is, but we will certainly be there with a booth. And given the interactions we've seen so far at these shows, we again believe it will be very promising for us as a company. Let's just, if we go on to the next slide, let's just talk a little bit about the product set that we have. We talk a lot about the platform. One of the key things about a platform is lots of individual products that you can buy and use individually, but also because they all talk to each other, it gives a much more compelling picture. Now, I'm not going to run through what each of those do, but I'm going to give you a little update on each of them. So if you look at Volpara Live, for example, this is our real-time quality control program. The idea is the images come out, we say good image or bad image, to take a look in detail at it. We've done lots of work on that over the last 2 years. We are slowly but surely getting traction on it. We've had issues with connectivity or Wi-Fi in particular, and where to place those screens, but we seem to be over that now with some happy customers coming out, providing us with good quotes. So we're getting more and more bullish on that one for the coming years. The scorecard, which we used to call Volpara Insti, you'll have seen recently we've got a new FDA clearance for that. That FDA clearance has produced a much more robust algorithm, which our customers are very much benefiting from and giving us lots of great feedback on. We were only able to do that update to make it much more robust because of the power of big data and AI. We have something like 50 million images in the cloud. That's a lot of implants. That's a lot of poor quality images. That's a lot of weird things you don't usually see very often. But because we've got such a massive data, we really can train AI up to spot weird things and remove them before we get to the more serious processing to generate breast density scores. So that was a big occasion for us to get the FDA clearance a few weeks ago, and customers are delighted so far with that. The other point I'll make on that is the overall platform there for that solution is what we call an OVA. So it's a virtual appliance. So it moves us completely off any hardware supply to customers. But also that OVA is much easier to install, much easier to monitor, and much easier to update as we go along. So rather than having weeks of updates, we now hit a button here in Wellington and we can update in a few hours all our customers on that solution. Again, going back to one of the things we talked about earlier, becoming a much more scalable company. Again, and this is all background work. We've been selling Transpara, this computer-aided detection. This is where you mark on an image potential signs of cancer. Some of you will have seen recently ScreenPoint secured a $28 million funding round to enable them to move quicker. We welcome that. It builds up a stronger, more stable ScreenPoint, and it really enables them to, for example, cover new machines quicker than perhaps they were doing previously. Covering new machines quicker is important for us as an overall company because part of our brand is being multi-vendor and being able to work on whatever X-ray machine is in a particular clinic. Genetics testing, recently we linked up with Invito, which is a multi-billion-dollar NASDAQ-listed genetics company. So we now work closely with Myriad, Invito, and Ambry in terms of they can offer our software to radiology centers in order to generate a smooth workflow right the way through to genetics. Or equally the other way around, if we have a site which is keen to start moving towards genetics, we can link them up now with one of their preferred genetic testing providers. Down the bottom, analytics. This was the product we launched on the cloud in 2016. We've been through various fantastic iterations of this, and this is one of our biggest selling products. We have a major upgrade coming on that 1st of October, so 6 or 7 weeks away. All the work we've done on that over the last year or so for the breast imaging manager and chief technologist has been extremely well received. But now we're focusing on the experience of the individual technologist, and we're seeking to move it from being a big brother experience more to being something much more positive and proactive with the individual technologist. That comes out 1st of October. You'll see press releases around that. Again, feedback on the early versions of that and the prototypes has been extremely positive. Patient Hub, this is the product that we acquired from MRS in June 2019. This has been a big seller for us over the last year, especially when combined with a risk package. We have a major upgrade of this coming out very shortly for October Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Again, part of that trying to appeal more to consumers. Instead of having a letter come out with just a ream of text on it, those letters at Patient Hub and Volpara scorecard customers will start to include, or can have the option of starting to include, the actual breast images onto the letter. So following that, the age-old adage of a picture tells 1,000 words, we're going to use those images to really attract attention of the woman to the fact of what her breast composition actually is. That is all on track for October or end of October, and I'll touch on that a bit later again in this talk. Finally, on risk then, risk assessment. This is the giving a woman a risk of developing cancer. And on that then, this is where you start to triage women into genetics or into MRI and so on. We very much offer breast cancer risk within Patient Hub, and that's been one of our big selling products of the last year. And it was really some of the dynamics that we saw around that area, which said to us, hey, this whole area has got a lot of tailwinds. It's really starting to take off. Patient Hub's great. We also need to offer this into some of those big electronic health record companies. And that is what led us to the acquisition of CRA Health. So we're in a great position now where we can supply risk to Patient Hub customers, or also customers of those big EHRs like Epic right across the US. So if we just move to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the platform and pipeline. Just on the left-hand side there, you'll see this is a pie chart showing the pipeline for the next year or so. What is really encouraging here is the number of deals that we're seeing. It's about 1/3 really related to Patient Hub. It's about 1/3 related to CRA Risk, the company we brought from Boston. And there's 1/3 or more up there from Analytics and Scorecard. So each and every product that we've brought into the Volpara family have got very significant sales pipelines ahead of them. And obviously, as we just discussed now, one of our tasks is to start to expand it even further by pulling through, the reconstituted Volpara Live, for example, into everyday use in clinics. So we are very happy with that spread of products and the pipeline ahead of us on that. I just want to talk a little bit about ARPU. This is always a feature of investor talks. We've just had another great deal come through over the last couple of weeks. This is a Seattle-based hospital group, long-term Volpara Analytics and Volpara Scorecard customers. They've now upgraded their whole system to a platform. So they've now included Patient Hub and risk assessment. 30,000 women a year, and this is $6.50 per woman that we're achieving at that site. So if you think about, we can now add on top of that genetics, live, screen point, and so on. You start to see our pathway to $10 is becoming more and more clear as we get more and more of these bigger platform deals playing out. Next slide, please. So you should be able to see here a set of numbers. So we talk a lot about personalization of breast care, but I just wanted to kind of show you in numbers what this actually means for a typical US customer. Each customer in the US has slightly kind of different ways of how they want to do risk stratification. And this is one from a customer over on the East Coast. So at this customer, if 1,000 women come in, the first set of triage is based around the National Cancer Center network guidelines about who qualifies for genetics. And at this particular site, they reckon it's about 19% of women would actually qualify for genetics testing. They then do risk assessment, which is the 20% and 15 to 20% and so on. That's the lifetime risk, and they stratify on that. And then finally, they stratify based on breast density. So their aim is to use Volpara Risk to generate or to work out who qualifies for genetics, Volpara Risk to work out who qualifies on that lifetime risk, and then Volpara Scorecard to stratify on the density scoring. Look here, I mean, yes, 19% of those 1,000 women would qualify for genetics, 79 for MRI, based on the insurance guidelines that are prevalent in the US today, and 49 would be recommended to have breast ultrasound. Putting that together, you will see a lot more cancers found early, but also then there's up to $1 million of extra imaging revenue for a site of 10,000 patients. So you can see the tailwinds in the US from the American College of Radiology, Society of Breast Imaging, CMS and others. They're all pushing towards this risk-based approach. And it really is a great dynamic because one, it leads to cancers detected early, but two, it can be very profitable for sites if implemented properly in a smooth workflow. And really that is our job, that smooth workflow and providing the objective evidence all the way through to make this work as automatically as we can do. Just go on to the next slide. Let's talk about breast density. Monica touched on this earlier. We are passionate believers that all women around the world should know their breast density. You know, breast density really is a double whammy for women in terms of increasing their risk and increasing the risk of cancer being missed at screening. So they really should know it. As people have seen over the last year, you know, there is competition in this space. The competition, though, almost uniformly all gives an A, B, C, or D out. A, B, C, or D, as this surgeon in Chicago recently said, really, in his view, is kindergarten stuff, and really should be heading towards precision measures of breast density so you can screen more precisely. So Volpara really stands uniquely apart from the competition in giving what we call a volumetric breast density out. This is the true volume of the breast, which is dense tissue. So in this case here, the woman's breast volume is around 750 cubic centimeters. That's about average size for an East Coast US lady. But then the overall density, or how much volume is actually dense tissue, is 6.7%. Now, imagine she was 55, some family history. If you just put B into a risk model, she might well pop out as being average risk and not have MRI recommended. But because we've got precision scoring, 6.7% is actually a high B. It could well be that triggers her to be high risk and therefore MRI getting recommended. So the ABCD in our view is functional in one regard, but really is too coarse a measurement to get to precision measurement, precision medicine, which is really where the industry wants to get to. So yeah, we believe this is more and more now being seen by the market over there in the US in particular, and in particular because people are seeing these numbers flow into these risk models. So that's a dynamic we're going to see playing to our advantage over this next year. Just go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so we're all at personalization of breast care, and we've talked there about certain women going for MRI, certain women going for ultrasound. The overall industry, though, continues to evolve. So we firmly believe there'll be more risk models coming down the road from different groups around the world, and we intend to be helping those groups with some of the data that we have, and we'll touch on that again in a minute. We will be the route to market for many of those models into those patient hub and EHR customers. And there's a lot of talk at the moment. If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see two images. One is the conventional mammogram, and one is what they call a contrast-enhanced mammo. This is where a contrast agent is injected. So you take one image without the contrast and one image with the contrast, and then you subtract the two. There's a belief out there in the community, which has to be proven in clinical trials, that instead of doing MRI or instead of doing ultrasound, you might be able to do contrast-enhanced mammography instead. The advantage of that is the X-ray machines are already out there in the market and in breast imaging units, so you don't have the availability or cost of MRI. But as I said, MRI has been very proven in randomized controlled trials, so we look forward to seeing some results. But that is one area where we fully expect personalization of breast care to continue to evolve. And again, we see an important role for Volpara in that, not only just in selecting women, but also helping quantify those images given the volumetric density assessment we just talked about. We do believe computer-aided detection will continue to develop, so we very much will continue to sell best-of-breed CAD as part of our solution. There's been a lot of press recently around blood tests for cancer, and we so look forward to seeing how they play out. And the big thing for those is how sensitive are they for how many false positives. But obviously, there's a lot of work around the world on that. I will just note some of the work recently around prostate cancer in particular, where imaging has proven to be very beneficial over the PSA testing itself. So blood tests it could well end up being part of the picture, but they're not going to be the overall solution to breast cancer. All these things that are really moving the world towards prevention, but as I indicated there with contrast enhanced, for example, we need a lot more data and a lot more evidence needed for change. So we'll just move on to the next slide. So this is one of the things we've started to really talk about over the last year to investors. And you're going to see this as a mantra from Volpara going forward. Yeah, we have a great platform, but really we see the future now in terms of much better prediction of cancer. And the way to do that is to use data from not just thousands of women, millions of women, preferably linking them up, just the images to the history, to the genetics. We believe there's going to be a whole market opening up for monitoring of women over time. So this is, so if your woman is found to be high risk and you go into tamoxifen, for example, you want to be tracking what that tamoxifen does to your breast tissue over time to make sure it's beneficial. But also there's other elements which are coming to the fore now, such as analysing the effect on the breast of drugs like hormone replacement therapy. If you're on a form of HRT and your breast density is going through the roof, you should talk to your doctor really about whether you should continue that or maybe switch to a different formulation. So there's a whole area there that's opening up, and we believe we're in a prime position to benefit from. And then if all that fails, then you've got the detection at the end, and we believe that will be standard CAD as we've kind of it's kind of out there today. But also we believe increasingly there'll be temporal CAD coming in. Yeah, flagging up areas of the breast where tissue has emerged over time, and so doctor, you really want to take a very close look at it. But you can't personalize anything without empowering women to make informed decisions around their care. So another big element of what we're doing, and that's is the genesis of Project FUN really, is providing the information to make women understand breast composition and to really help them understand what their choices are, based on science. So that is going to be a big part of what we do going forward. If we go to the next slide then, as we talked about, personalization requires data at scale. We are in a unique position really in having access to raw X-ray images, patient factors, screen results, pathology results, and now thanks to CRA, some of those genetic results. They're not all linking up together, and there's a lot of data cleaning to go, but it really is a unique data set. Over 50 million mammograms now in the cloud, with over 1 million women in there with more than one screening round. And we have the rights to use that data for product development. And really our aim then, and the way we're going to look to use that data for the better good, is by following that mantra then: prediction, monitoring, detect, and empower. The article in the middle there, this genomics one, after we announced the deal with Invitae, certain newsletters over in the US, the ARC newsletter, and this one on NASDAQ, really picked up on the story, and in particular the ability to link genetics through to the images and so on. And they really recognised in that article in particular the amazing things we could start to do to the benefit of women if we can get all this data into one place, and if we can really start to apply AI at the scale that we need to really analyse that data for the better good. Okay, let's go on one slide. Let's talk about intellectual property. The green line at the bottom of your screen shows the number of granted patents. So we're up to about 100. Volpara was born on intellectual property, and it's been a very important part of us as a company from day one. What's interesting about this graph then is that blue one. We've not just done a few patents and stopped. We are almost going exponential now in the number of patent applications out there. And that really shows the level of investment we're doing into R&D and all the background work that's going on as we look to the future and seek to get patents in place to really protect the future, to give us freedom to operate and so on. But also, increasingly, we are using IP now in a more aggressive fashion. And as we note there on the right-hand side, we've used trademark and copyright law with a couple of potential competitors now to ensure our IP is protected. Let's go on to the next slide. should be a snapshot of the global research world. So at any one time, Volpara is involved in over 100 studies plus around the world. We don't talk about these all the time, but if you go and search on Google or somewhere for literature on Volpara, we're now up to something like 400 publications, nearly 200 peer-reviewed papers, and they come out almost on a monthly basis. The Norwegians have done a whole range of research on us and published in very prominent journals over the last wee while. They are now moving to a more out of the research mode into more of a product trial, which is great to see. DENSE then, this is the 10-year randomized controlled trial over in the Netherlands where Volpara density selects women and then you do breast MRI on those women. The results in December 2019 were outstanding in showing a reduction in interval cancers. These are the nasty cancers which tend to be more aggressive and you really want to be catching them early. They followed that up in February 2021 with a second round of results showing a reduction in false positive generated by the MRI. And that's important to make it more cost effective. The Dutch are having a debate now, as we indicated a bit earlier there. MRI is very effective at picking up cancers. It generates false positives. And there's a big discussion in Holland whether they should continue with breast MRI or they should look towards using contrast X-ray for dense breasted women. So that is playing out. They're also looking to further ways on MRI, for example, to reduce false positives. And there was a paper out today, I think it was in radiology, looking at ways of doing image analysis on the MRIs, again, to reduce those false positives to make it more cost effective. So as with all these big trials, it takes time, but they are moving through the motions, moving from that research phase, all the way through to every day helping women by getting clinically implemented. At University of Melbourne, Professor John Hopper, we're doing lots of work with John, using some of that volumetric density unique stuff we talked about earlier for novel measures of risk. Dr. Jones in Adelaide is one of our top 10% in the world for quality of imaging, which is fantastic to see. And we're doing lots of work between them and Salford in the UK now on evaluating system-wide improvements with software. We continue to do lots of work across Asia. So this CCAMS and AH1 is one where we're looking at the biology and genetics underlying risk in Asia. There's a great paper out a couple of months ago looking at cancer type versus breast density from this group in Chinese women, which produced some really interesting results. In the US then, MD Anderson, we're doing lots of work on looking at changes in the breast with them due to chemo prevention, as we touched on earlier, with tamoxifen and other forms of chemo prevention for high-risk women. We continue to do long-term work with the Mayo and UCSF. They've been some of our longest-term collaborators, and we continue to look with them at risk prediction based on very broad data sets. In the UK, then, the PROCAST project was started probably 3 years ago now. That's run very well under Gareth Evans up in Manchester. It involved Volpara and CRA, which that's one of the places we've got to know CRA. It's been heavily delayed by COVID, obviously, in the UK, but it is now starting to wrap up in terms of the implementation. And they are now into the data and results analysis, and we expect some first publications in 2022 on that. Again, I mean, the UK is 2 million women a year screened. If they start to move towards more risk stratification, it will be, it could be a very commercially significant event for us if they choose us for that next phase of that project. That's kind of where we are in these projects around the world. We'd like to update you on these at the AGM, but at any point during the year, if you've got any questions about these, please do just let us know. We'll just note the BRAID project over there, Professor Fiona Gilbert at Cambridge. She's looking at personalised screening regimes. So the benefit of contrast enhanced, for example, versus MRI, versus standard X-ray versus tomosynthesis. Just go on to the next slide. So to put this up, this is Signify Research Limited. It is probably the world's leading company doing research into all forms of health IT at the moment. And this is a report that just came out by them about machine learning in medical imaging. They're going to do a breast imaging specific one soon, which we're looking forward to. But what was interesting in this one was the trends they put out. Transition from digital mammo to tomosynthesis, that's from 2D to 3D X-ray. Our software works on EVA. Adoption of cancer screening software outside the US. So this is, for example, the deal we did at Queensland and some of the other states in Australia and some of the other activity we're now seeing outside the US. As screening programs kind of start to look towards AI to really improve some of their processes. So again, that's a trend that's really playing into what we do. Breast density software, obviously, we are the leader in that space. Personalized risk-based screening with CRA on board, we very much are the leader in that space. The contrast enhanced stuff, will be Volpara helping triage women into that, and it'll be likely to be Volpara helping quantify those images afterwards. Triaging breast imaging in general, again, that is fundamentally what we do. Then that trend at 7 is an interesting one, screening younger women. We changed our motto as a company to saving families from cancer a wee while ago, and part of that was because we were seeing so many cancers being found in younger women with young kids. So that trend there is one very much close to our heart. With CRA, we actually start to now be able to offer risk assessment to women, very young women, and the American College of Radiology and others are actually pushing for risk assessment by the age of 30 to try and identify high-risk women to get them in at, say, age 35 or so to get them onto quite strict screening protocols. So all these trends then very much playing in Volpara's favour. On the right-hand side then as well, an interesting chart showing really if you look at the breast cancer screening market as a whole, it's the AI algorithm developers such as ourselves who are really having most influence on where that market is going. Now, I like this chart because it really starts to show how strong software is becoming in medical imaging. The hardware vendors are producing great hardware, world-class hardware, but really, the growth in the market and where a lot of people now are looking for the next level of change is coming out from the software vendors, and we're in a prime position to win that battle. So just move on to the next slide. This should be independent studies. So there's a huge number of AI companies bouncing around the world now, and we've tried to avoid some of the more AI hype statements that are out there. But this was a study came out of Holland a few months ago. This analysed 100 CE marked products and looked at the evidence that was sitting behind each of those products. And in breast imaging in particular, Volpara was by far and away the one with the most clinically validated, independent clinically validated software solutions, in particular here, the density solution. So we're big fans of AI, but we're also big fans of giving it out to people, researchers around the world, to generate the independent evidence to actually prove it works on any X-ray system, on any population. And we've been very proud with that number of publications and the evidence that's come through, showing how well it works around the world, how consistently the density solution in particular has been working. Let's move to the next slide, please. All right, less kind of glamorous information security. We've been investing very heavily into information security now for the last 4 or 5 years, ever since really we went onto the cloud in 2016. Many of our products are covered by ISO 27001. We're going through a SOC process as well, which is more of a US-centric information security certification in the US at the moment. We see information security becoming more and more critical as we see more and more breaches over in the US and elsewhere. And on the right-hand side there, you see some of the quotes which our customers have given about Volpara. These are fantastic quotes, and they're a real testament to the people we have in the team who are really experts around cybersecurity, but also the care we have as a company around patient information and really protecting it. So very proud to see these quotes come through, and we very much will be ramping up information security ever more, because we see it being an ever critical part of what we do, and we've now become incredibly adroit at talking to chief information officers and getting through those processes and to really kind of give the trust these people need to give us the POs to install us, to give us patient information. Just moving on to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about lung cancer screening before we wrap up. When we brought MRS a couple of years ago, we got around 7 or 8% of the US screening market for patient tracking. And that very much is what we call Volpara lung. Over the last year in particular, then the number of people eligible for screening in the US for lung cancer screening has doubled. We've seen some sites in the US, breast sites, start to take on lung cancer screening and buy Volpara lung or patient hub lung. But also then we've seen countries like Australia come out with announcements saying they understand now the benefits of screening, and they're looking at ways of actually setting up screening programs in Australia and elsewhere. So we're seeing a lot of growth opportunity in lung. You know, our focus really as a company is breast, but over the next wee while, we fully expect to see some or to be putting out announcements talking about partnering in lung. To really start building out what we do in breast into that lung world, that platform approach. So yeah, watch out for that as we go forward. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. This is investor relations. So we are revamping some of the investor relations that we're doing. So you're going to see a lot of the some new approaches come out over the next 6-7 weeks. As Paul said earlier, you're going to see an announcement around a new US director, highly experienced in commercial medical world, come out very soon. You're going to see new partner agreements, October, the Project Fund launch. And on the right-hand side there is part of that launch, which is a new consumer-facing web page, which goes to that key element of what we do, which is empowering women. And you'll see, obviously, RSNA has always been our biggest trade show, and we're building up to that nicely now. Some investor events, the mid-September ASX meeting, obviously that's going to be virtual at this point, and then the Morgan to Queensland conference, and I'm sure there'll be more we'll add to that. Last up before we move to questions, then, on the top right-hand side there, you'll see European Society of Radiology came out just recently, linking up with Dense Breast Info. They are the biggest radiology group in the whole EU, and they are very much now pushing out dense breast information to their members. And of course, you know, we're still waiting for the FDA to come through with their update, where we expect them to be requiring that every time you're screened, you are told your breast density to replace all the various non-standard breast density laws that are out there. Again, as soon as we hear more information on that, we will be letting you know. So with that, well, actually, we'll just move to the next slide before we go to questions. Yeah, this is perhaps the most important one for us as a company. Over the last year, these are just some of the emails that we've received over the last year. Yeah, ranging from the top one there about going off to a funeral for someone diagnosed with breast cancer, again 41, so very young. Yeah, right the way through to people who have really benefited from listening to some of our investor talks, understanding breast density, understanding risk, you know, demanding their providers actually tell them this critical information, and then acting on it to actually find early cancers. We thank you very much for sending these stories to us. These are the kind of stories which really inspire the team, both in Wellington and across in Seattle and Boston, to ever improve what we do. So these are a critical part of our story. So if you've got a story, please do send them over to us. Okay, with that then, if there's any questions out there, I'd like to just open the questions to me, Paul, or Craig, our CFO. who is online?
There's only one question, but it's unrelated to, it's more to do with voting. So it's not really a question I'd put to Paul. So I think maybe we should pause for 30 seconds just to see if a few questions come through.
Thank you, Craig.
Okay, here's one question. Are there third-party sources from which Volpara could acquire additional data sets? And what do you do? And what do you know about your competitors' access to and generation of comparable data sets?
Yep, we obviously we're extremely aware of what's going around the world around data and around what our competition is doing. There's actually an article coming up quite soon from Cancer Research UK. I've got a data set which they license out to people, and we are one of the licensees. So that's a useful data set in terms of providing cancer cases. There's just yesterday actually there was another data set announced from Duke University, which is a free one, which has got certain benefits, but again, it's really focused on cancer. All those data sets are kind of half decent. They tend to be well curated for their purpose, which is cancer detection, but they very rarely are linked up to all the patient history. They are very rarely linked up to the genetics, and they very rarely, in fact, I've not seen one yet, where you have a whole stream of temporal data related to it as well. And you don't have data sets at the scale you really need to really change the game in breast cancer imaging. So they are all big advantages for where Volpara is working today. Yeah, we're working hard now to link it all up, to really bring the benefit through of all that linking up and data cleaning, and that is a big focus of ours. But yeah, we're learning every day now. Doing data at scale is really a key advantage for us, and it's going to prove incredibly beneficial to us commercially.
Thanks, Ralph. Next question is Volpara looking at opportunities, I'm assuming, in the liquid biopsy technology space?
We very much, as a company, part of our, we're a software company, and we decided a couple of years ago we are a software company. So, we don't sell X-ray equipment, we don't sell compression paddles, we don't sell genetics. We don't do genetics testing ourselves, and very much see us staying very much as that software company. So we are certainly tracking what is going on in the liquid biopsy world, and maybe once when things are more proven out in the future, we would look to be partnering in some way, shape or form with some of those companies into a bigger IT infrastructure. But I don't see our salespeople anytime soon selling liquid biopsies.
Ralph, on the slide that you spoke about, independent studies, can you please explain how that will drive growth?
We almost on a daily basis now talk, especially the big screening programs. The big screening programs are very, very evidence-based, and which is why DENSE is so important. It's evidence-based, but also it's almost entirely independent of us. We see plenty of AI companies will come out, they'll train their data on their own data set, and they'll publish results on that data set, which are always very positive. But how well does it work on a different X-ray machine down the road? How well does it work on a different population of women? One of our big key advantages, all the way along has been giving the software out, letting people independently test it, so people can trust the results which they see. And that is really what's driving interest in what we do from these big screening programs. But also, Craig, I think as you well know, I think it was just last week, one of these big US sites that we're working on as well brought up the whole issue of DENSE. and they're fascinated by Dents, the independence of it, the size of it, and the outstanding results it produced. So again, that kind of study is driving growth in the US.
Somewhat linked, but the next question is, what is the expected timeline regarding the US legislation on breast density?
Yeah, well, I wish I could tell you more affirmative on that. Obviously, everyone expected it to be out in October last year, but that got caught up in Donald Trump and elections and COVID and all that good stuff. And then with change of administrations, the FDA and other organisations always go into a period of hiatus where they get their heads around all the various things that are going on. So in January this year, the FDA reiterated that they're working on it, but we've not heard anything else since then. So as far as we know, the advocacy groups that we talk to often are still very much pushing for this to happen. They want to see standardization of wording. They want to see standardization of legislation across the US. But we have no exact timing on that as of yet.
Thanks, Rob. There's no more questions at this time. Do we just want to pause for 15 seconds and see if any others come through?
Yeah, I'd also like to, Craig, just give everyone a couple of minutes that, we are coming towards the end of the meeting, so we would like to close the voting system. So please ensure that you have cast your vote on all resolutions, and we'll give you a little bit of time now to do that. Okay, so I think now it's Craig. Has any more questions come through?
No more questions, Paul.
Okay. I think now I'd like to pause and close the voting on the voting system. And as there's no other business that can be lawfully put before the meeting, I now declare that this annual general meeting of Volpara Health Technologies Limited shareholders is now closed. The results of these votes, as I said earlier, will be released to the stock exchange later today. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend today, and we appreciate you being shareholders of Volpara. So thank you very much for attending.